Hi Marvin, great to get your video as always. You're doing really good work. You mentioned the microphone, and yeah, it actually sounds really good. It sounds better, quite a bit better. Your voice is a little distant as would have been expected because, as you said, your mic was further away. But then when you played, it seemed like a really authentic sound. I felt like I could really hear the real sound that you were making. And yeah, now that there's a microphone, there's really no difference between you and Al Hurt and all those guys, right? So that's all we needed was a upgrade in the microphone. But no, it does sound actually really good, and it's quite an authentic. Seems like a very realistic representation of the sound. So great, thanks. I didn't realize that you had a microphone, so thanks for shifting over to that. And you mentioned that reading week is next week. I did two other music students this week, and they both had similar complaints. One guy's been working really, really long shifts and going right till like from the morning till 10 p.m. and just a lot of craziness. Another lady has kids at home and it's been crazy, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? I'd have to say really to all of you that this is kind of the test. Like there's people that are out there that are doing stuff like this, that are doing music or whatever it is. You know, I also teach martial arts and it's a really similar deal. People are sending me videos the same way. But it's the people like you that are not what I call fair weather practicers, right? So if you can do something and turn in a video on a week where you're feeling really strapped for time, you're in the game. You're going to be just fine, right? So congratulations. It really means a lot. It's really the critical thing. And often as we just feel like, I'm barely hanging on here, but no, you're doing way better than barely hanging on. You're nailing it actually. So, getting down to what you recorded, the Arbans 133 was great to hear you play it on one note. You don't necessarily have to play the whole study on one note, just a few bars. But I like that you played as much as you did because, as you noted, it was rushing a little bit. I would say it was rushing on the eighth notes more than the quarters. I think the rushing on the eighth notes gets you to a place when you get to the quarter notes, and now they're rushing, right? So it's about getting those eighth notes to line up with the quarter note beat coming from your metronome. So that's a really valuable challenge to recognize that's what it's about. And it's universal. That's one of the primary benefits of playing a book like the Arbans. And you know, for brass players, there's no book like the Arbans. It's just the Arbans. The Arbans is the best. There is another book out there called the Saint Jacome, which is goes a little further in some ways. It's a little more complex, and it might be a place to look at some point. But the Arbans is the one, and you know, doing the same rhythm in every bar for an entire 2 or 3 lines of an exercise is just a great way to just get it together. You know, just can you play a quarter note followed by 6/8 notes or whatever it is, right? And that's really what makes a great musician, and that doesn't really end when you get to very, very advanced levels. It's still, how deeply can you play those things really, really in time, and the relationship between quarter notes and eighth notes, and really make that beautiful and solid. It doesn't really go away. It just gets at a higher level, right? So you're really dealing with the exact primary issues of successful music making. And I loved how it really settled down as you went. When you were just doing it on one note, it was a little bit, and then it got better and better and better. And when you got to the written pitches, it was way better than last week, like way better. So it's really just really specifically, as I've said before, we're getting our priorities right. And it's one thing to intellectually accept that, okay, rhythm is important and ought to be a priority. But to do what you did, to actually play it on one note, which sort of automatically prioritizes the rhythm, now that becomes your actual priority when you play the real pitches. And so that really comes across. It's just so much more successful. All those people you mentioned, Jens Lindemann and all those guys will be going, yeah, that's the right priority. This guy's on the right track. Okay. What else was I going to say about that? There needs to be more priority, speaking of priorities, paid on the articulation in the Arbans, and that means shorter notes. So you're getting into a longer note value style, and the beginnings of the notes are getting a little dirty. Sometimes they're getting a little, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I went down and had a lesson years and years ago when I was in my 20s with one of the most famous bass trombone players in the world, a guy named Edward Kleinhammer, who wrote the book called The Art of Trombone Playing, and was the bass trombone player in the Chicago Symphony for 35 years or something. And I had a lesson with him. It was awesome. But he was a real character. And he said, the sound you're making with your articulations. He had this kind of gruff voice, and he said, if you played that back at half speed, it would sound like a baseball bat hitting a garbage can. He said, it's not a musical sound. And like it need to be a beautiful musical sound at the beginnings of the notes. It's really critical. Now, the whole note is critical. What happens in the middle of the note and at the end of the note is all really important. But psychologically, the way we hear, we're biased to the sounds at the beginnings of notes. Also, the control at the beginnings of the notes are what determines whether we're in rhythm or out of rhythm. So if we're not really in control with where that note starts, if it's a little bit of schwa, then we can't really control whether it's going to really be where we want it to be rhythmically, right? Because there's a little bit of chaos in there, right? So shorter notes leave some actual silence between the pitches so that you can really clean up the beginnings of those pitches, okay? But pro marks, you're doing really, really well. I'm looking forward to when you have more time and you can do more. I'd like to hear like a whole page of these. I'd like to hear them up to tempo, but what you're doing is just fine, better than fine. Scales, I think your flashcards are brilliant, and I really appreciate, in a sort of more general sense, that you're finding a healthy balance between being a student and doing what you're being told to do, and also taking your own initiative as to what you need to do. That's a really important balance. But I have to say that I'm personally not especially good at it. Excuse me, just a second. Just need to check something. I tend to go one way or the other. I tend to just do things totally my own way, and I don't want to hear anything from anybody, or I just become like a disciple and do exactly what I'm being told and nothing else, and sort of have like zero initiative or something of my own volition. And so I think you're finding a really healthy balance that's clearly working for you. So yeah, that's brilliant. And then watching you work through those keys using your system seems really, really good. You've essentially eliminated the kind of fishing around, which is such a dangerous thing in this kind of work, because it kind of works, because you can fish around, randomly put vowels down, and eventually you can't find the right note. So then that kind of short circuits any actual development, because of course there's no future in that process, right? So you basically eliminated that, and you're working with what are the notes of the scale, what are the notes of the pentatonic scale in this key, and what are the syllables of the pentatonic scale that apply to the tune that I'm playing. Those are the big categories that we're working with here, and you've really zeroed, laser focused on those things, and it's working beautifully. I was watching carefully as you went through some of those keys, and I remember in B major in particular, I think there was a spot where you weren't sure, and you stopped and you thought about it, and then you just played it right, because you did the math. You came up, okay, what syllable am I looking for? What is that in this key? Bam, you had the right note. Love that. That's it. So it's a matter of getting on the right path. In some important sense, it's not all that important how far along that path we are, because there's always going to be people ahead of us and behind us. It's not a race. But except that we want to feel that we're moving compared to where we were. We don't want to be playing the same way we were a year ago, or in some cases there's people that are playing the same way they played 10 years ago. You really want to feel that you're moving forward. So you need to get on the path, and you need to be facing the right direction, and you need to get moving. And that's clearly happening here. So I'm just delighted. I appreciate that you catch some of the magic of the pentatonic scale. It's quite a remarkable thing. It goes way back. They've got bone flutes from literally 40,000 years ago that were the pentatonic scale, man. That's what human beings have been doing since time immemorial. It's somehow hardwired into us. So there's a lot to be gained there. Now, excuse me, I know that you're excuse me. I know that your time is limited, and at some point, I think it would be really awesome to make improvisation a regular part of what you practice and what you give to me in lessons. I don't think we're there yet right now, but as just a thing to do. If ever you just feel like casually picking up the trumpet and just playing some music and not having to concern yourself about where you're at in your process or something, and just for the sheer pleasure of playing, excuse me, the pentatonic scale is a great place to go. So you just pick an easy key where you can play, you know, the pentatonic scale. And I've got 3 rules for improvisation where you can just make some stuff up. Number one is get a beat going on. You don't have to put a metronome on, but just tap your foot. So I'm going to do it. I've got my foot tapping. I don't know if you can hear it. It doesn't matter. Just a random tempo. It can be fast or slow. It doesn't really matter. And then the second rule is keep it simple. So I don't have to play all 5 notes. I'm just going to pick a key. I'm going to pick my C major, which is your D major. So I'm going to pick your D major. And I think I'm going to start on the F sharp rather than always starting on the tonic. I just see what happens. I've got a beat. I'm going to keep it simple. And the third rule is use repetition. Play something, play it again with a little variation, play it again like you played it the first time. Like that's the way to improvise. So I'll just make something up. So I'm not going to say that was good. I don't care if it was good or not. But what I can tell you is it's really fun. And it's a beautiful way just to explore music with your instrument. It kind of gets some of the payoff for all the beautiful work that you've done and all the progress you've made, which is in itself enjoyable. I hope you're having fun practicing. That's kind of the point. But sometimes we just feel like closing our eyes and just playing our instrument. And that's, the pentatonic scale is a very strong resource for that. Okay, so that's great work there. Claude Gordon, I put really fine work you're doing there. And you mentioned all those names, Jens Lindemann and Al Hirt, and all those names at the beginning around the microphone. And so I kind of had them in the back of my mind because I know some of those guys. I know Jens, we go way back. And, Jens would hear you and say, yeah, he'd say to me, yeah, Ken, you're doing a good job with him. And it's like, well, actually, he's doing a good job with me. So if Jens heard that Claude Gordon, they'd go, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's, you're moving in the right direction, and it's good. It's good, solid trumpet practicing that you're doing there. I was a little bit confused about which one you're on because you said you're doing 20. I think you said 20, but you were going up to the G, and the G is number 21. And if you're doing 21, then there's 3 parts, A, B, and C. So I was a little bit confused about that. And it's something that happens pretty frequently with music students. Because these things are harmonic series, it's easy to get on the wrong pitch and keep going, and just stay in that realm. But maybe it should be one notch, one harmonic higher or lower, right? So just to be sure that you're on the right one, because it is important. Doing the one that just goes to the E is good to do. Then it's only part A and part B. But to really nail that E, because of course you can play the E, you can play the G, you can play higher, but they kind of go, the book is put together the way it's put together on purpose. So you go back and now E, it's a D concert, but the E is now the top note we're going for. So you can really kind of raise the bar on how well you get that top note. And I know you were thinking about, getting yourself set for the high notes and all that kind of stuff. And so I wondered if it would have been more successful had you been going for the E rather than the G. If I'm right about which lesson you're on. I might be confused about that. So anyways, I just want to refine that. So make sure that you are on the right pitch, because that's important. It's quite a different thing when you're on a different harmonic. So I just said nice work. Looking forward to more, particularly looking forward to more tunes. I think I asked you this before. I'm going to send you a link, if I can remember, of the the Canadian Brass Book 1 for trumpet. Now I don't remember if we worked through that book or not. But the thing is, you could totally ace that book so easily now. And there's a place for that, you know, because you can really do your best playing. So if you don't have time to be working through new tunes, like in the book that you're in, it might be fun just to blast through a couple of easy tunes along with the recordings in the Canadian Brass Book 1. So if you have that book, if you have that already, I'd recommend it if you have time. And you may just simply have no time for any kind of tunes regardless of you know, how hard or easy they are. But if it's an issue, but I don't have any more time to really practice, but I would like to play something, but I don't really have this tune ready yet, so I can't really play any music right now. It's really fun to go back and play some music that you've played before. And you're not spinning your wheels, because of course you can play those easy tunes way better than you played them before, because you're a way better player now. And I'm thinking about Phil Smith, who came to Edmonton to play with the symphony. Phil Smith being the principal of the New York Philharmonic and one of the top half a dozen trumpet players on the planet, I would say. And he's a Salvation Army guy. So when he was here, he went to the Salvation Army Church and played with them on their Sunday service and stuff. And he played Jesus Loves Me as a little solo on the cornet. And you can bet it's the most beautiful Jesus Loves Me you ever heard in your life, because he's such a good player, right? So to be able to play something simple, but you know, there's no limit to how well you can play something simple. And sometimes people misunderstand that. I talk to sometimes adults in their amateur bands, and they're like, oh, I don't like this piece because my part's too easy. And I think, what? Play it like Phil Smith, you know? How easy is that? Anyhow, great work, Marvin. I look forward to next week. I hope you have a more comfortable week on Reading Week, and you have more time to do what you want to do. And I look forward to the results. Thanks, Marvin.